In this next segment, we're going to talk about the revolutionary government. Now, we saw earlier how the Katipunan was a brotherhood, right? It did have its own structure of government, but it wasn't necessarily a government that looked like governments emerging across the world in newly independent states. So, a group of people, provincial elites, particularly from Cavite, decided to take matters into their own hands and by dirty means create a revolutionary government for the Philippines. So here's our question here. How did the Philippine Revolution transition into the hands of the provincial elite? So dati diba, it was lower classes. Kung titignan natin, yes, matalino definitely si Emilio Jacinto at si Andres Bonifacio. But if you look at their histories and the way they lived their lives and what they were able to pass on to their children, they were definitely not part of the elite. You can't even call them part of the intellectual elite because they didn't finish their studies. Whatever intelligence that they gained was through willpower, not opportunities that were easily available to them. Unlike, for example, the Ilustrados who, of course, they worked hard too. Pero how do you compare someone who didn't even finish second year high school but continued to read in his spare time to someone who was given the funds to move to Madrid and given the funds to study in schools in Madrid, diba? Um, there's a level of opportunity that Emilio Jacinto, Andres Bonifacio, and the people under them did not have. So, ayun. The revolution continues to unfold, but now we have problems within the Katipunan movement. So from August 1896 to March 1897, there's trouble in Cavite. So the Katipuneros, they're split into two factions, the Magdiwang and the Magdalo. The Magdalo is the faction that Aguinaldo is part of. Now, because this is difficult, no, it's a big problem. Instead of just giving it to the Judicial Council that we saw earlier, Bonifacio decides to go there himself to try to manage that tension. It's so bad kasi na there are times when either the Magdiwang or the Magdalo are in battle against the Spanish and the other group wouldn't help them because of the tension between them. No? Ganun kalala. And so Bonifacio goes there. And what happens is, he's supposed to manage the dispute. But when he arrives, the Caviteño Katipuneros gather to address the factional issues, but some of the members suddenly move to transform their organization from the Katipunan into a revolutionary government. So basically, like a snap elections. And Bonifacio's outnumbered here. He only has himself and a couple of men, and most of the people there are already rallying in favor of creating a revolutionary government. So, reluctantly, he goes through the process and elites are elected into power. Bonifacio isn't even included in the cabinet. So, ito yung, ay wait lang. Super blurry. Ito yung Biak na Bato Supreme Council, which was what was formed, no? You have Emilio Aguinaldo as the president, Mariano Trias as the vice president, Antonio Montenegro as the secretary of foreign affairs, Isabel Artacho as the secretary of interior, Emiliano Riego de Dios as secretary of war, and Baldomero Aguinaldo as secretary of the treasury. Now, this structure is very similar to the kinds of governments that would emerge, especially in Latin America. So, yung idea nila ay, we need to look like governments around the world if we are to be taken as a serious revolutionary movement. Now, the problem with this is the expertise and the leadership that is represented by Bonifacio is not, parang hindi siya in-acknowledge. And it's more than just a petty dispute between personalities, no. It represents a fundamental shift in the way the revolution is governed. So you have these people who are basically self-made individuals, part of the lower classes. And the upper classes in Cavite don't recognize that these people are good enough or smart enough to actually lead the revolution into a real state, a real government at the end of the day. And that's what this entire episode represents, the elite taking over the management of the revolution. So, in response, the Naik Military Agreement is created by Andres Bonifacio and some of the people with him, like General Artemio Ricarte, Pio del Pilar, and others. and they sign an agreement denouncing the new government as illegitimate. So, what happens is, hindi ko in-include yung events na yun dito, pero nagka-standoff sila, and because the Tejeros Convention says there's a new government, yun yung recognize ng mga tao sa Cavite. And Andres Bonifacio, as well as his brother, are not exiled, they're executed as traitors to the new revolutionary government. It's really dirty, I swear. So, anyway, wala na magagawa si Bonifacio, obviously, because he's been executed, which is a really clever way to go about it, no? Dirty way, pero ayun. Now, the revolution is leaderless, and this new government puts itself in a position to lead all of those people who joined it already. Alam namang they won't continue with those numbers now. So now the problem is, how do you manage all of those people and convince them to follow you? In fact, later I'll talk about the split of the revolution. So what happens next now? So Governor General Rivera of the Philippines, because of course the Spanish are still here, offers amnesty to rebels who surrender. But they don't surrender immediately. They instead declare the Republic of Biak na Bato and create a constitution. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na they kind of want to approximate Western type governments. But the funny thing is they model or directly copy the Cuban Constitution of Jimaguayo. So, they're trying. They're like, we have the oligarchy of intelligence here on our side. And then you look at how they're unable to create their own constitution. They'll create one on their own later on. Anyway, sorry, shade. In November to December 1897, in battle after battle, the Republic of Biak na Bato is defeated. And this is partly due to the fact na a lot of the people who were following Bonifacio and who were part of the Katipunan do not support Aguinaldo, and they go off on their own kind of adventures against the Spanish. So the people under Aguinaldo are defeated and they have to retreat. And eventually, they're forced into negotiating a truce with the Spanish. So in exchange for being exiled to Hong Kong, yung government ni Aguinaldo will receive 1,700,000 pesos to be paid in installments by the Spanish. You know that meme where they're like, you give up the Philippine Revolution, I give you 1.7 million pesos. But anyway, sorry. Point is, you find that there's a new development in the revolution. Kasi part of that was they had to declare na wala ng revolution sa Philippines as a way to get that money. Now, some scholars argue that this was a strategic move on the part of Aguinaldo because the repercussion if they didn't surrender was their capture. So it was better to be exiled than to be captured. And that's what some people say. Another group of scholars say that Aguinaldo and his cabinet corrupted the funds that came from Spain when they were supposed to use it instead for buying arms to support the Philippine Revolution. We can't establish yet who is right and who is wrong, but the fact is, the next development was the creation of the Hong Kong Junta. So this is parang hindi na kasi siya government, kumbaga. It's still a government, but in exile. So it's not as functional as it would be if you were in your own country. And so they're now called the Hong Kong Junta. And with the settlement money, Aguinaldo and his government in exile rally support to return to their forces in the Philippines. So may proof naman kahit papano that they tried to purchase arms, especially from like American generals. Anyway, in May 1898, they realize that they face a new enemy, the Americans, who arrive in the Philippines to defeat the Spanish. And when they defeat the Spanish, they just kind of refuse to leave. So we'll pick up on that later. No, for now, we want to look at the Philippine Revolutionary Government itself and what it wanted. Now, there are different versions of the revolutionary government. You have what we mentioned earlier, the Republic of Biak na Bato. You have the Hong Kong Junta when it was exiled, and you have the Malolos Republic, which we're going to discuss in Module 7. Now, the goals of the revolutionary government, more or less, were to transition the revolution away from a revolution headed by a secret society to a revolution headed by a transitory government. which looked like your Western type government. So they wanted to copy a government structure similar to those in modern states, and they wanted to achieve an oligarchy of intelligence, where the leaders were better qualified for their positions on the basis of their higher education and their, witnessing different kinds of government styles through their travels abroad. Parang ganun. It's an elitist government, obviously. So the revolution now splinters. The Katipunan continues under Emilio Jacinto, but they're less funded and less equipped. But numerous former Katipuneros continue to resist the Spanish across Ilocos, Bicol, Samar, and Manila and its environs under Emilio Jacinto. But the Spanish, kasi nga na exile na sa Hong Kong sila Aguinaldo, no? Treat them as acts of banditry rather than insurrection. So, pinapalabas nila na mga criminal lang yung nang-aatake ng mga Spanish dun instead of revolutionaries. And that's something that we will find being employed by the Americans as well. So, Emilio Jacinto continues to organize forces in Laguna. Now, we find that even as Aguinaldo was exiled, the revolution definitely continued in the Philippines. In Cebu, for example, a certain Francisco Llamas organizes a revolutionary committee. The movement, commanded by a certain Leon Quilet, actually are able to take the capital of Cebu on April 3, until Spanish forces retake the island's principal towns. So, in the same way, there's a back and forth between the Spanish, but they don't stop, even if the revolution has been declared over. Officially at least, by Aguinaldo. In Panay, the island joins revolutionary activity with the formation of a conspirators committee in Molo, Iloilo. So, more people are joining the revolution despite the exile of the Hong Kong junta. And this is building up, to the point where the Americans arrive in the Philippines. So the Americans suddenly arrive, and how did their invasion, in essence, affect the Philippine Revolution? So we continue the timeline here. In April 1898, a new player enters. The Spanish-American War erupts in another part of the world over the bombing of Havana, Cuba, and the US has entered the playing field. So my war between the Spanish and the Americans, and basically what they need to do is make sure that, wait, I have a map here. Where's my map? Yes. So this is the Philippines and this is the United States. The problem is the Spanish have an established route across the Pacific. Remember our galleon trade maps. And the Spanish has a powerful navy in the Philippines. So, although nawala na yung ibang colonies niya, may nakastation siya na warships dito sa Pilipinas. The same warships that defeated the Moro areas of the Philippines. No? So, yung goal ng United States basically ay to wreak revenge on the Spanish and make sure they can't attack the US from the Philippines. So they come here and they try to form an alliance between Aguinaldo and them. So certain American consuls approach Aguinaldo to join forces against the Spanish in the Philippines, and part of the reason they do this is to make sure the Filipinos don't attack the Americans as well. Now, in May 1898, the American Asiatic Squadron, mouthful there, they're basically a navy, right? This is a painting by a certain Taylor of the Battle of Manila Bay. So, this American Asiatic Squadron defeats the Spanish Navy in the epic Battle of Manila on May 1. So you gotta hand it to them. This was a major point of pride because the Spanish, for the past centuries, had been identified as an old money kind of naval power who once ruled the 7 seas in the world. And now the United States, through a show of power, had defeated their last standing navy in Asia. So, sa sobrang, paano ba to? Sa achievement na to, the Americans had projected themselves as an emerging world power. So, as a result of that, the Hong Kong junta is able to return to the Philippines. So, on the side of the Filipinos, now they're quite happy. On June 12, 1898, the government in exile, led by Aguinaldo, returns and formally declares the Philippines an independent republic at Kawit, Cavite. But in the next months, from June to January, tensions escalate between US forces and the Filipinos because the Americans just refuse to leave. And if you look at the numbers over the months, pataas ng pataas yung numbers nila. So if you already defeated the Spanish, why are you still sending soldiers to the Philippines, right? You surely can't be here to attack us, are you? And well, that was parang part of the kind of back and forth from the government of Aguinaldo. May mga nagsasabi na the Americans are gonna attack us. And some people were saying, no, they couldn't possibly attack us. Why would they attack us? So it's causing tension within the Philippine government. And there's definitely tension between the soldiers on the American side and on the Filipino side. And then we find out that in January 1899, the Treaty of Paris is signed between Spain and America. So when the Treaty of Paris is signed, they give control. For some reason, I didn't put it here. They give control of the Philippine Islands to the Americans for the sum of $20 million. And that's crazy because we were already running our own revolution with the idea that the Americans came here to help liberate us, when in fact they bought us from Spain. So in January 1899, the American government under President William McKinley releases their true intentions through the Declaration of Benevolent Assimilation. The document justifies the U.S. control over the Philippine Islands, which is how they called the Philippines at the time. No? So sabi nila, we need to teach the people of the Philippines how to run a modern state, and therefore we're going to stay here to teach them how politics should be run. Now, it's difficult to assess the actual effect of the Americans as entirely good or entirely bad. Because definitely the public school system that they introduced was able to turn the Philippines into one of the most literate places in Asia in the 19th and 20th centuries, in the 20th and 21st century. Pero hindi natin kakalimutan yung activities nila that were actually very undemocratic and very condescending, and how their entry into the Philippines wasn't benevolent, but it was an invasion. We know this because it began with an act of war. So from February 1899 to 1902, the Philippines declares war against the United States. The US views the uprising as a Tagalog rebellion rather than a Philippine government fighting for its right over its own territory. So brand na naman nila yung Philippine Revolution. And they say, these people aren't revolutionaries. They're just people who want to claim a revolution when all they are is a Tagalog rebellion. In 1902, Aguinaldo is captured and surrenders in the name of the Philippine government. And this is important diplomatically, diba? Kasi here's the one person who is supposed to be the president of the Philippines, even if they don't really recognize the Philippines. And this person declares na tapos na yung Philippine Revolution. So this is like the second time Aguinaldo declares the end of the Philippine Revolution, once to the Spanish and now to the Americans. And to a certain extent, it's damaging to the reputation of the revolution. Some people are of the opinion that he should have just, like, if you were to be captured, you might as well die. Knowing that you didn't give up the revolution. Parang may ganun na impression. But anyway, following this, the Americans commence a rebranding of the Philippine Revolution through suppressed nationalism, so that revolutionaries who did not surrender would be perceived by the public as petty criminals. So they're not fighting for independence, they're just bandits. They just want to cause trouble. They're not aiming for anything bigger than that. So through the next couple of decades, in a way, the Americans are trying to brainwash the Philippine public into thinking that independence should not happen through revolution. It should happen through the United States saying we're ready to be independent. And that's funny because they invaded us in the first place, diba? It wasn't an act of acquiescence or agreeing that they would like teach the Filipinos how to be modern state makers. Anyway, war continues anyway in Batangas, the Visayan Islands, and Mindanao and Sulu. So from 1902 to 1913, the revolution is continued by smaller groups, which we're going to meet in Module 7, around the Philippines. And the Americans, in 1902, declare the end of the Philippine insurrection. But they kind of declared again the full pacification of the islands in 1913. So, in a way, slowly nag-die out yung Philippine Revolution, which is really sad. Okay, so what marks the end of the revolution against Spain, and does this signal the end of the Philippine Revolution? So technically, the Spanish in the Philippines were defeated by both the Americans and Filipinos. So definitely the Americans had the resources to defeat the Spanish Navy, but in the provinces where most of your Guardia Civil were, it was a mixture of old Katipunan members and other rebel groups who defeated the Spanish in areas like Ilocos, La Union, Central Luzon, provinces around Manila, Panay, Cebu, etc., etc. So at the end of this module, the revolution continues, but with a new enemy, the Americans. And the Americans continue to, yun yung sinabi ko kaninang, employ strategies to pacify the Philippines or to get people to stop revolting. There are three main strategies. First, they wage the Philippine-American War and capture Aguinaldo. So that's strategic. If your leader says, tapos na yung revolution, everyone else has to regroup under different settings. Now, secondly, by the way, when I say strategic, I'm not praising the Americans. I'm just parang pointing out that it was a strategy to pacify the Philippines. So the second strategy was to suppress and rebrand nationalism as not nationalism, but instead banditry. And if you want to speak of nationalism and independence, it should be on the terms of the Americans. So after that, they created, or while they were doing that, they also created an alternative government structure. So in a way, they were making it difficult for people to revolt. If you could gain independence by paano ba to? By cooperating with the Americans, wouldn't that be easier than waging revolution where you could die? Parang ganun yung ginagawa nila. Nagsaset up sila ng alternative. Pero parang if you look at it, the Americans weren't supposed to be there in the first place. So they were creating options in a very not benevolent way, in a way that was very manipulative, really. So what were the American objectives in the Philippines? Initially, to defeat the Spanish Navy in the Philippines as part of the Spanish-American War, but later it decided it would be bad business to leave the Philippines on its own and decided to annex it as its own colony. So they made us into a laboratory for injecting their values into what they perceived to be an underdeveloped country. So all the while, in a place called Hopkinsville, Kentucky, the Daily Kentuckian on its front page declares, "Free. General Aguinaldo proclaims Philippine independence. The final triumph is now close at hand." What does this mean? This means that the Americans know that there was a revolution here. They know that Philippine independence was the objective of that revolution, and we were just bandits. We were fighting for our own country. So mixed messages on the end of the Americans, and I'm just trying to portray na we shouldn't celebrate the arrival of the Americans despite the benefits we got out of it. It's more like it's good we got benefits, but they knew we were campaigning or we were fighting for independence, but they decided to quash, to stop, to destroy, to hijack that movement for their own ends. And I think ultimately that is a lesson that has to be repeated. Yeah, we learned a lot of stuff from the Americans, but I guess we also learned how to be manipulative politicians, right? Anyway, that's it for this 6.2 module. Let me just run you past everything we discussed here to help you refresh, to help you kind of pull everything together. Okay, dun na lang tayo sa start. In Module 6 in general, we talked about the formation of Philippine nationalist consciousness with a big focus on the Philippine Revolution. So we looked at an overview of why it's important to study this period or the key ideas which help us remember why this is a relevant time in our past. No? And we also looked at the different phases of revolution and actually went through each of them. In Module 6.1, we looked at contexts to the Philippine Revolution, which are important. They tell us how the revolution was enabled in the first place. As we said, revolutions don't just pop out of thin air. They have to be not necessarily prepared for, but the conditions have to be present in order for them to grow and to survive. And we might have survived the Philippine Revolution if the Americans hadn't hijacked it. We might have survived the Philippine Revolution against Spain if the Americans had not hijacked it. Anyway, we looked at two ways to frame contexts, the two routes to revolution, liberalism and our tradition of resistance, and also 19th century developments which set the stage for the revolution to emerge in 1896. So we looked at that, important changes, so on and so forth. We looked at some interesting stories related to our tradition of resistance, and in Module 6.2, we looked at the phases of the Philippine Revolution, beginning with the propaganda movement. So, tinignan natin yung reasons behind the propaganda movement emerging, what it wanted, how it ran up until it started to fragment and disintegrate. And in the ashes of the propaganda movement, we find emerging the Katipunan, which was ready to take a more violent stance against the Spanish because they no longer wanted to be a province of Spain, but instead an independent country. Now, the Katipunan period, as the leader or the head of the Philippine Revolution, would span from 1892 to 1897, and this would be largely led by lower classes. So we looked at what it wanted, its instruments of propaganda, its structure, key thinkers, and how it imagined the values of this nation which was being birthed. After that, we looked at how the revolution transitioned into the hands of the elite under the revolutionary government, which had three different versions. You learned about the Republic of Biak na Bato and Hong Kong Junta. And for now, you know the name Malolos Republic, which was what we were declared independent under in Kawit Cavite, di ba? But you'll learn more about that in Module 7. So, nakita natin yung goals nila and how the revolution was starting to face even more pressure by splitting. Not only did it split, it also faced an entirely new enemy that was supposed to help us, but eventually decided it would be more profitable to stay here, both for their image as a world power, but also economically. So the American invasion affected the Philippine Revolution through three strategies that we mentioned earlier. Yeah. They waged a war against us, and we also waged a war against them. They captured Aguinaldo, they rebranded Philippine nationalism, and they created a new government structure as an alternative to achieve independence under a more civilized banner. So, yeah. We're going to pick up in Module 7 by looking at how the Americans established their colony here and how they affected the formation of Philippine politics in a way that still greatly affects present-day Philippine politics. Thank you so much for listening to this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!